Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Jordy. I'm here to do a overview of the suit of swords. We're going to be looking at the minor arcana from 1 to 10, all the individual meanings, and kind of tying them all together. We'll also talk about the page, knight, queen, and king of swords. And I've also put the major arcana on the top row here that are associated with the element of air, because the suit of swords is associated with the element of air. And as an overall suit, that means we're talking about communication, the mind, and just thinking processes, different emotions that are connected to our thoughts, and there's a lot of symbolism in the fact that the sword is air, so it's cutting like the wind. It can hurt people, the more aggressive that the air is. All four suits can hurt and be negative in some way, but the suit of swords is, if we look at all the different imagery in the numbers 1 to 10, a lot of it's quite threatening, a lot of it's quite dreary. It represents shadow aspects of our experience. That's why we see a lot of like grays, and we see a lot of toughness in these cards as well. There's a lot of people wielding these weapons. There's also the weapons being used against them, or plaguing the mind, or keeping them in a false sense of entrapment. So it's interesting. The suit of swords can be used to talk about motivations behind the wands, the cups, the pentacles. Oftentimes it's through our pain, it's through our journey, and not just the positive elements but the negative elements that shape us and define us. And that's why this suit is so important, and why it's so dark, and why it's so sharp and weapon-like. It's the pain of growth, where we look at the suit of wands as like traditionally a growth energy in general, because it's wood and it's growing. We see the pentacles as a form of growth as well, growth of your abundance, growth of your skill set, your wealth of knowledge. And when we look at the suit of swords, it's your growth through pain, through understanding, through truth, through lessons learned, perhaps the hard way, And it talks about how the mind can be our greatest enemy, or the opposite of that. Instead of being the greatest enemy, it could be a tool in your tool belt. And it's a suit that can be mastered. And if you can master this suit, well, then all the other manifestations become that much easier. This is where we trip up. This is where we fall flat. There are other negative tarot cards in all the other suits where we can run amok with an overabundance or underabundance of that element. But with the suit of swords, you can run amok at any point with your mind. Any one of these archetypes can stop you. It's a deadly suit, with all these swords here. So this is an interesting topic today. I would say I'm a big feeler when it comes to reading cards for people and for myself. So when I see these cards, I immediately allow myself to feel what someone might be experiencing. And because I've gone through a lot of pain and struggle in myself, I can really relate to these cards. I find the Suit of Swords to be almost easier to read than the Suit of Cups, because the Suit of Cups is all about happiness and fulfillment and joy and just having an abundance of emotional capacity and sensitivity. Well, a lot of us have a hard time relating with that energy because we've been living a lot of these swords energies instead, or some of the wands, or some of the pentacles that are lower vibrational. So just because the Suit of Swords seems lower vibrational doesn't mean it's not powerful, doesn't mean it's not a beautiful energy that to be appreciated and respected. The lower vibrations and the vibrations of intensity that are in these cards do transform us and shape us. So I would just say it's good to have a healthy respect for these cards, and to know that everyone can relate to them. Everyone has their own story, right? And so we've talked a lot about the Suit of Swords. The Ace of Swords can speak on potential, just like all the other aces do. It represents the whole suit itself. It's one of the most positive cards of the whole suit. In this card, here, I'm directing it towards the wrong camera. In this card here, there's a victory laurel wreath, or head adornment on top of the sword. So it's a card of victory and of winning. It's a yes card when it's upright. It's a great idea. It's a truth. It's a boundary. It's a conversation that is going to solve your problems. It's the solution card, very positive. It's when the mind has a single focus. It's when everything is clear, everything is centered. It's a moment of freedom. It's a moment of empowerment. Whenever I see an Ace of Swords, I know someone's empowered themselves. And I love that about this card. So a lot of people will default to the Ace of Swords as being a communication, an idea, a new thought, And that is usually the case as well in a reading, but it does have more depth to it. It does talk about overcoming struggle, what it takes to get back into this clarity of mind. You have to go through some of these other cards here. Specifically, the Ten of Swords has a special relationship with the Ace of Swords because that's where the cycle begins and ends. And that's the case with all the four suits. I just seem to have made a stronger connection with that detail when it comes to the Suit of Swords, because as you can see in the Ten of Swords, someone is quite mortally wounded here, but the background of the card has a bit of a sunrise or a sunset in it, and it definitely marks an energy of being more hopeful, even though you may be at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, or at the very last of what you can tolerate when it comes to pain. It does represent like a new beginning, both the 10 and the Ace. The 10 being the part of the new beginning where you are finally accepting what's happened to you, picking yourself up off the ground, and heading towards the direction of healing, even if you might have a lot of healing left to do. And then at some point, after hanging out in some of these other swords cards, you can get back to just having that one sword where it's in your hand and you can control it, instead of having them all stabbed into your back. So it might not be a direct route from the Ten of Swords back into the Ace of Swords. You might not immediately bounce back into this state of empowerment, but eventually the roads lead to this opposite energy here. So that's a really powerful message about those two cards. So yeah, the Two of Swords is, a two. It talks about relationships and decisions and choices. And the Two of Swords in this card, the person is blindfolded and kind of blocking off their heart, protecting themselves. It's threatening, not only to themselves but to other people. And in the background, there's some ocean imagery, which is very popular for this, card. Every card deck is different, but this is a running theme for the Two of Swords, is that their back is to the ocean. There's no more land left for them to retreat to. They literally have been pushed all the way to the water's edge, and the only thing left they can do is defend themselves there, or they can take their own life, So it's a hard position to be in, that Two of Swords, if you're looking at it as like somebody chasing someone down with weapons. But it's not always about that. It's not always that like strong and visceral of a message in a tarot reading. Like, if you look at the Two of Swords, it can be a blockage, something you don't want to think about, something you might be in denial of. Even if all evidence is pointing towards one obvious fact, you may still be caught between multiple facts and multiple versions of the truth, where you don't know which one to choose from. So it's definitely a card of needing to choose, but it's a difficult decision. And it does talk about things being blocked, like communication blocked, not talking, maybe blocked on social media for some people if they want to look at it that way. And it's, when this card comes up in a reading, especially a personal reading, it makes me question whether the person I'm reading for can even handle or understand or is ready to hear what I have to say based off of the other messages that are around that card. I say this because not every person you do a reading for is going to be open to all topics that you see coming up in the cards. And you have to ask yourself, when you do see swords in a reading, whether it's appropriate to dig into that energy, because when you do, it's usually painful for the person. So it's a very fine balance of respecting the cards and respecting what the person has gone through and acknowledging it, but doing it in a way that it's not going to terrorize the person or re-traumatize them or put them in a space where they didn't have to go that deep and dark with it. You're not a guidance counselor, you're not like a trauma therapist when you're a tarot reader. You're just there to give them confirmations of what they've gone through, so that their message and the wisdom behind your cards with the overall message and some of the messages gained along the way can be absorbed instead of being rejected by perhaps a harsh message that's trying to be delivered. So I just say that when you do see a Two of Swords in a reading, it does mean tread carefully with how you're talking to the person. And that can go with pretty much seeing swords cards in general. And it's just a good, safe practice to be really compassionate and empathetic and know your limits, how far you should go when you're talking about a topic. So that's a little bit more beyond what the Two of Swords I wanted to talk about with that, but I feel like that's an important thing to just insert in this video today as well, especially with this suit. So you do have to filter as a tarot reader sometimes, unless you want to be that tarot reader that's hurting people, right? Because you will see some negative, dark things that people have gone through, and it's, it can be really a fine line to walk. I can even give personal examples of when I felt I've gotten close to crossing that line with people in readings, but I feel like maybe I'll do that in another reading someday. Another lesson or video where I talk about ethics, because that's quite a big topic, and I don't want to derail this card meanings video. So let's move into the Three of Swords. The Three of Swords keywords would be sorrow, crying, wounding, like a wound, an open wound, a fresh wound, pain. This goose got hit by three swords flying during a storm and is now falling down towards the ground. like all stabbed in the heart, So it's very immediate. Like when the Three of Swords is in a reading, that means something painful has happened recently. And if it wasn't that recent, then the pain is still fresh. So it can be a very traumatizing card, or it can be something that's as easy as having, stubbed a toe or gotten into a really divisive fight with a partner one night. But then the Three of Swords the next day could be surrounding other positive cards in the reading, and it'd be like, oh, okay, that wasn't the end of the world, where it's just a 3. So the Three of Swords can be really dramatic, talking about separation, betrayal, like deep sorrow, depression, and that can all be true, but it can also just talk about day-to-day hurts and pains, and the dynamics of like feeling separated or like at odds with somebody in even a conversation, to the point where feelings got hurt. And so with the Three of Swords, it has like the rain in the background as well, so it's kind of like a weather card, just like how the Five of Pentacles has the snow in the background, and the Sun card's bright and sunny, and there's different like natural symbolism in some of these cards as well, like landscapes and all of that, and weather and time of day, like the sunset and the Ten of Swords. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that as well, because that might be a little detail that rings up in your reading. I've seen, like, there's a couple of cards in this deck, and it's usually in I think in every tarot deck there's at least 2 cards with rain in it. But anyway, if you see lots of stormy cards, or lots of cards with clouds in it, or lots of cards with bright sunny skies, you know that that's a theme, that the weather is representing some type of spiritual meaning to it. So the Three of Swords is like pain, separation, heartache, wounding, a fresh wound. If you wanted to attempt to read this energy early on in a reading without the person letting you know what they've gone through, I would say tread carefully with this card. Don't assume you know exactly what they went through right away. Try to feel it out, and keep your statements from being too direct. The whole purpose of the Suit of the Swords cards is not necessarily to be able to accurately predict with all this visceral detail what someone has gone through that's hurt them. The whole point of the Suit of Swords coming up in a reading is that there can be some airing out of that energy and talking about it and moving through it, so that it can be transmuted, so that it can be understood, at least, that it's part of your story. And we don't want the whole focus to be about the Suit of Swords if we don't have to let it be about that, So that's just my advice anyway. I'm sure other people handle these cards differently, and that's perfectly fine. There's no wrong way of doing this, but, I just feel like I'm trying to teach these card meanings to people who may actually use these in personal readings with people, and try to, be accurate fortune tellers or accurate tarot readers. And, so I'm not going into, like, the history and the lore of these cards per se, but I'm going into like how they practically show up in readings for people based on my own experience, and how you should go about handling them. So I hope that what I've talked about so far is really meaningful to you. Okay, moving into the Four of Swords, we have the and the reason why I'm saying all these things as well is because tarot can hurt. Tarot hurts. Like, tarot readings can hurt somebody. And the Suit of Swords is where it happens. Okay? Alright, moving into the Four of Swords. The Four of Swords is... it shows somebody in this card sleeping in their bed. They're holding a sword. They don't quite trust that they can sleep without a weapon. There's like 3 daggers hovering over their head. Um, in the traditional Smith-Waite deck or Rider-Waite, it's actually a scene in the basement of a church with a stained glass window and with a funeral box or whatever you call them, like a coffin, with a knight engraved on top, holding a sword over its chest. So it's actually a card of death, in the traditional interpretation of the card, and it's like the whole part that represents like a funeral, basically, and one of the traditional meanings behind that card is that in that space of time where someone is being buried and people are mourning the dead, that the fights and conflicts that were happening that led to this person's demise, because they were probably murdered in the battlefield or something like that, or through some blood feud with another family, that there's a truce, basically, while the people are burying their dead. They're no longer under attack by the enemy, at least for a night, at least for a day, until the dead are buried. It's a very sacred part of war, and that's actually been played out throughout history, and it's been not in every battle. Some battles have been vicious and didn't wait for you to bury the dead type of thing, but there was a bit of honor and chivalry in that in a lot of battles throughout history. So the Four of Swords does talk about a truce. That's one of the original meanings of the card. So that's why people say when they see the Four of Swords, oh, you need to take a break, time out. It's break time, it's a pause. Because that's what the history of that card has come to mean. But it also is a card of meditation and prayer, because the card is traditionally in the basement of a church. You don't see it in this card, but I'm just giving you the rich details of the Four of Swords. Because it's in a church, because the position of the hands of the knight that's carved in stone on top of the coffin is shown in a prayer position. It is a card of like connecting to your spirit guides, of prayer, of like connecting to the spirit world. Perhaps when sick on your deathbed or under a lot of stress. The Four of Swords is when we need to meditate and get connected with what's outside of our thoughts, outside of our stresses, outside of our dynamics that we're living through at the time. So when you think of keywords for Four of Swords, it's a pause, it's a break, it's a temporary pause in action. It's also a healing card, a card of meditation, of prayer, and of taking the time you need to heal, emotionally mostly, but also physically. It's also a completion card because it's a number 4. So we have the Five of Swords here. This is a really cool card. It shows like a city, maybe the outskirts of a city, and there's a knife fight. And some people in the background have lost that knife fight, and they're kind of like clutching their heads, and basically they're really upset that they lost. This person's collecting all the knives, and we're assuming that person won the knife fight, or maybe is cleaning up the mess afterwards. You don't really know, but a lot of people regard this card as like conflict, as fighting, as arguments, as like a win or lose type of situation where one person comes out a winner, one person comes out a loser, but at what cost is for the win, Like, did you have to hurt people to get there? Did you have to say some things that you didn't mean to say, or things that you did mean to say but are going to hurt people? So it's a win at all costs type of energy. And so it's a lot like the Five of Wands, which is competitive and also talks about arguments and fights. But the Five of Swords is more intellectual, more strategic, more cutting, more aggressive than the Five of Wands, and can also be subtle as well, more subtle than the Five of Wands. Like, it can flip the other way. Um, it's very extreme. So when you see this card come up in a reading, it can represent, in its most watered down version, like a conflict between people where there's a difference of opinions, basically. Difference of opinions, people are not on the same page, is what I'll usually say when I see this card, just to open things up for the conversation. And, also, feel from this card, like, you may have like some hard feelings because of what you've had to do. You may have been the person who lost in this fight. You may be the person who's going to win. But ultimately, is it worth it? And you bring those questions forth to the people who you're reading for. It's not necessarily the best energy to be in, but there is a clear winner in this card versus in the Five of Wands. It's like five people just out in the field, like hitting each other with sticks, kind of thing. So the Five of Swords is kind of better than the Five of Wands. Like you do get something out of it by being a winner, type of thing. Where the Five of Wands is more of like a participation award. Anyway, Five of Swords can also talk about internal conflict, like inside the head. Like, should I do this? Is it worth it? What do I believe? Do I need to push this point? Do I need to project this? Or, what's the best course of action? And fives are about change and about chaos and adaptability, basically. So we've got the Six of Swords, which is 6 out of 10. It's after the first 5, so we're more than halfway through the suit now. And we see that it's got a nice, happy scene, actually. It's still a little bit cold looking, but this person is in a boat. There's swords that are not pointed towards them, but actually pointed upright. And if you look at all the different swords that are there, they're actually useful hunting and carving tools and fishing tools. And this person is in a boat, perhaps fishing in this river, or whatever they want to do, hunting, or just being out in nature. And there's a snake following behind. So it's this beautiful card. It's a beautiful interpretation of the Six of Swords. It has the two shores, one side and the other side. So when you think about the Six of Swords, in the traditional deck, the Smith Waite, I'll talk about that, then I'll compare it to the scenery in this. It has, some people who have like hoods over top of their head, kind of bent over on a boat, with some swords sticking into the boat, like they brought them with them on a journey. There's a ferry person in the back of the boat who's using a long stick to ferry the boat across the river. And, it's a river card. There's some waves in the river, but it's going from one side of the card to the other. It's got direction in the card, versus this one is just moving off into the distance. In the traditional meaning, it's actually going from one side to the other in an upward angle. So that's really significant because it is a go with the flow energy. It is going in a positive direction, but it's also indicating that you came from some pain, some hardship, win some, lose some, stressful decision-making type of cards in the past here, in your past journey. So the Six of Swords is kind of when we decide to remove ourselves from the situations, the thinking, the thoughts, or at least the people involved in our problems, in our conflicts, and choosing not to fight, not to battle, but to enjoy life and to find better opportunities to spend your time and to think, and better ways to think about things. So it's a card of improving your mind, improving your situation. And traditionally it gets cast as a card of, travel, because the people are on a boat, and long distance travel at that. So it's actually considered like going from one land to the next type of energy, or one country to the next, or one city to the next kind of thing. From one different environment to another. So that's a bit of an exploration card. It can talk about migrating or immigration as well. So it's a card of movement, and it's a slow but steady movement. It can be rocky from where you came from, but it's getting smoother towards where you're heading. So you can look at the waves in the card and make a lot of statements based off of the energy you're feeling about the water in the card, because it has a lot of water in this card. And it also, you can talk about the boat, you can talk about the swords that people are taking with them on this boat, the pains they still bring with them on their travels. You can talk about the fact that some force or ferryman or unseen force is navigating the boat, making sure that people get from one place to the next safely. The Six of Swords is, the ferryman and all of that has a relationship to the ancient Greek myth about entering the underworld, entering from life into death, and traveling across the river Styx in the ferry, so that you can go to the gates of the underworld and be judged to where you're going to spend the rest of your existence. So, the Six of Swords can be a card of like transitioning from one dimension to the next, or one world to the next. So it does have like an interdimensional energy to it. And I know Santero has mentioned that as well in her readings, probably for similar reasons. And the Six of Swords is about like just surrendering and realizing you got to go with the flow, and I often say that as like a safe way to channel that card. Just go with the flow, surrender, just gradually go along with what other cards are around this card type of thing, because it's a good direction. It promises better times ahead. So the Six is about harmony, and that's a beautiful card. I love the Six of Swords. So the next card is the Seven of Swords, which has one of the worst raps in the whole rap. Like, this card is like well known for being the stealing card, the cheater, the liar, the person who's running away. So when you see this card pop up in reading, it's hard not to like freak out a little bit. You're like, what did this person go through? Were they robbed? Did they get cheated by somebody? Did someone steal from them? That's so dramatic when this card comes up in reading. And then you're like, well, where do you start? Like, unless you're getting a psychic channeling of exactly what it is based off the other cards around them or your own confidence, you could really mess up by talking about the wrong thing with the Seven of Swords in a reading. So whenever I see this card, I find it an endearing card, because, and hold up, the reason why it's endearing is that often, well, it's not endearing, but I feel closeness to it, because basically the Seven of Swords, this person has no other choice but to do what they're doing. I mean, they may have other choices, but they believe the right choice for them is to steal these objects, is to cheat on that person, is to lie to that person in order not to get hurt. Who are we to judge this person for making their decisions and the decisions that they've made? We don't know their story. Even though this person clearly will be punished if caught, are you going to be the punisher? Are you going to be the one that enacts judgment on this person? So, I feel like we gotta let people a little bit off the hook with this card. The person cheated on you. Well, there's a bigger story back there. Even though that's horrible and no one deserves that, and you don't want to support an abuser kind of thing, you still don't know the full story. So you have to be really careful with the Seven of Swords and the conversations that come out of it. You don't want to judge people, or at least I don't. And you also don't want to water down what people have gone through, but you also don't want to be too much. Maybe what they went through was something kind of minor, and you're looking at this card as being like, oh no, they've been robbed, so that's what anyway, so I always can't have to suppress a giggle when I see the Seven of Swords in some readings, because it pops up in a lot of readings, and it's got this YouTube reputation of being like the drama card. But you know, it is about dishonesty. It is about self-preservation, strategy. Like, what's the best strategy? Is it an undesirable one? You know, is the best option an undesirable option? And yeah, just be careful with that card. Is all I have to say about judging people. It's a 7, so it talks about pathways. So it's very spiritual. It affects your spirituality greatly when you make decisions that hurt other people, and it's self-motivated. You know, you do it because you have to do it, but eventually that catches up with you, kind of thing. It's also a point of strength, of like knowing self-worth and self-value, knowing that you have to do something or no one else is going to do it, type of energy. So yeah, there's a lot of complexity to that card. We have the 8 of Swords. That's a lot of swords at this point. They're all surrounding this individual. This person's also blindfolded, like in the 2 of Swords. And that's a traditional symbolism. They're also bound by ropes. And it's raining. It's in a bog, kind of by the shore. In this card, it's by the shoreline, but it's hard to see. And there's also like a castle up in the distance, or a large house. But in the traditional card, it's in like a bog, and the castle's up on a cliff far in the background. But it's removed from the town. It's removed from the home. So it's when we don't feel safe. It's when we feel anxious, basically. Like we've been surrounded. Like we don't have any other options but to just cower in fear, you know? Like it's when our fears get the best of us, basically, the 8 of Swords. That we don't have excuse me, my throat just went dry. We also don't really have like the belief that we can break free of a cycle or improve our situation in some way. So it is a victim card, you know, which, no judgment, totally has its place in this suit. Anxiety is real, and people are victims, you know. Like, some people have horrible things happen to them, and you know, and that's a touchy subject. But the 8 of Swords is about, basically, like in this card, this person can, like, there's nobody around them keeping these swords in the ground. There's nobody else around this person, like, kicking them at them or holding the ropes together. Like, this person could, like, roll around a little bit and use the swords next to her to, like, cut the rope, and then cut the, you know, she could take the blindfold off, and she can escape, basically. She can do something about this situation. Like, she's left alone with all these knives, and that's the tool to cut free from the rope. So, you know, you do have your power of your mind to, you know, work through anxiety, to work through fear, to work through panic or victim mindset. And there is an energy of emancipation from this deck. From this card and from this deck. But the 8 of Swords does talk about like emancipating yourself from something, liberating yourself from something. It's a card of empowerment because 8s represent power and abundance. So the 8 of Swords, you know, it's similar to the 2 of Swords. When you see it in a reading, just know you're dealing with someone who's got a lot of pain, and they're coping with it the best they can, but they've got, the way that they're coping with their pain is limiting their manifestations in some way, their beliefs, their self-perception, and there's room for improvement there, you know? And it might not be up to you as the reader to improve that situation for that person. Maybe it's enough just to acknowledge that they have it and focus on other parts of the reading. You got to really choose wisely with the swords how much you want to dig into them, and I'll keep saying that throughout this message about the suit. So yeah, 8 of Swords. Free yourself from the restrictions that are there, type of thing. And you know, you can't, and it does talk about anxiety, you know, and panic. The 9 of Swords Usually it shows somebody lying in bed. This person's kind of in bed. There's like a quilted blanket. And they've got the 9 swords, all the way around the head. So this person feels like they're under a lot of stress, a lot of attack. It's like he's got these 9 different blades, all with different opinions and different ideas, circling around in her head. So it's very much like an in your head type of card. Like at nighttime when you're trying to sleep, plagued by your thoughts and ideas, and because of all of this overthinking and worry and fear, like basically you can't think about anything else but what you're thinking about in this 9 of Swords, whatever's happened or whatever you didn't do or should have done better, or whatever happened to you. So it's an extreme state. The 9 being the 9 out of 10 swords. It's probably the most painful, even though the 10 of Swords looks pretty darn painful, doesn't it? I would say the 9 of Swords is more active torment and pain. So often the card, when you see this card, you think of keywords as like big heavy hitters like guilt, doubt, fear, misery, trauma. This is a traumatized person, basically. Or they're working through a trauma, whether they get traumatized by it or not. They're processing some really strong thoughts and emotions, and the thoughts are winning, and it's a card of like having kind of given up, and it's really stressful. So it's a dark card. It's got the black background in the traditional tarot. So when that card comes out, it has to be handled delicately. It's affected the person's mental health at this point in the stage. Like, yes, there's wounding and separation in the 3 of Swords, and it can be a grief card. But grief isn't exactly a mental health issue, And here we have someone feeling not really safe, restless, maybe a bit paranoid in the 4 of Swords, but there's different types of like basically quote-unquote mental health issues in these cards, and each of the cards have like different flavors of what those different types of mental limitations might be. So ultimately they are just limitations. They're just things that people get stuck in, just like how other people get stuck in different pentacle cards or different wand cards. People in life get stuck in some of these patterns. And, it's not a permanent state. It doesn't have to be for people. Although when you're getting to the 9 and 10, there's a lot of recovery that has to happen. There's a lot of time that has to happen, a lot of healing. And it's gotten pretty bad at this point, there's usually a lot of guilt and fear with the 9 of Swords. And it is a card of blaming yourself or blaming somebody else. So we have the 10 of Swords. Here, this person's basically dead on the ground with 10 swords in their back. How could they not be dead? But there's kind of like this assumption that they're not dead in this card. I mean, they could be, but tarot is not about predicting death. I mean, you're never really going to do that in a tarot reading because that's inappropriate. So you don't talk about the 10 of Swords as being like, oh, you're dead, or you're going to die soon, or someone died. You don't do that. But what you do see with the 10 of Swords is the sunrise or the sunset in the background, the hope, You do see the betrayal, you do see the suffering, how long of a cycle someone's been in. I mean, it's a 10, so it does talk about the whole cycle of the whole suit, And it's an endings card because it's a 10. It could be a bad ending, basically, when you see this card, or a painful ending. I mean, what's truly good or bad, right? So, yeah, with the 10 of Swords, keywords: betrayal, pain, suffering. Things are going to get better. You can't get any worse than this type of energy. Everything's fine, but it's not fine. I've seen that interpretation as well. It's like someone says everything is fine, but really they're in a 10 of Swords energy. I mean, you have to have had pretty strong denial to have gotten to the point where you've let 10 people stab you in the back. Do you know? Or you fought really hard and you lasted really long. There's another way to look at that as well. And you're really tough. You're a survivor, you know? Those swords you can pull out of your back, you can heal. So there's a lot of sensitivity to this card, but there's also a lot of strength. And, it's a heavy energy. It's the 10 of Swords, right? So, when you see that come up in a reading, it's like, oof, there's a pretty awful situation that's happened at some point in this person's life, or is happening currently, or, God's forbid, might be happening in the future. So, usually a 10 of Swords is coming well in advance, though, because you've already gone through so many other Swords cards to get there, type of thing. So it's not usually a surprise. It's something that's been going on for a long time, usually, which is unfortunate. Now, we have the 4 court cards. The Page, the Knight, the Queen, the King. Both the Page and the Knight being mostly androgynous, or able to be any sex or any gender type of thing, or any sexuality or whatever. And same as the King and Queen, they can represent different genders and sexualities and all of that. But the King and the Queen are more so stronger and more dominantly feminine and masculine in their energies, whereas the Page and the Knight are more flexible, or still learning. So that's how, and that applies to every suit. But what do they all have in common? They're all really good thinkers. They're all quick thinkers. They're all brave, willing to do what they need to do in order to protect themselves and the people they love. They're a warrior class. They may be very skilled at what they do, or they're going to figure out a really quick way how to do something, even if they don't know exactly what to do. They're strategic, and the Page of Swords, some people talk about this as being, well, it's a student card because it's a page, so this person's a student of knowledge, a student of truth, a student of empowerment, of, it's also a card of technology, so a student of learning technology, or higher level skills of levels of organization. Because, the steel knives in these cards are a technology. They're more advanced than sticks or rocks. They require skill to wield. So that's why the Page of Swords can talk about technology. So it's a card of asking questions, being inquisitive, being curious. Where it is student energy, it's a quick learner, and it can be a student with attitude type of thing as well. The Page of Swords can become obsessive and compulsive, and they can, it's nothing's more important for them than being right or knowledgeable about a subject. So they might be a little bit blunt, or not as tactful. They may even go to extremes of spying or projecting a lot about you or onto you. So it is an energy of it can be toxic, right? Just as it can be positive. And a lot of people on tarot reading channels will look at this card and say, oh, someone's spying on you, or thinking about you, or about to communicate a message to you. And it can be those things. I've seen it in personal readings, and I've said those things, and it was very accurate, But I also like to think of it more of as a questioning card, a learning card. And oftentimes in the reading, it's just a placeholder for somebody who's younger that needs to be talked about in the reading. It's a person card, it's a court card, so it doesn't always have to have this deep meaning. It can just represent a person, who has these qualities, or maybe has this mission that the Page has. And the Page's mission is always to espionage, or sending, trying to convince another court to open up to an idea. It's like an envoy that you send, or a diplomat, anyway. They're definitely errand people of the kings and queens, you know? The Knight of Swords, this person is usually on a horse, and the knight is all, you know, completely armored up, and, well, this person has a helmet anyway, and they have their sword, and they're like yelling, and the sword is the horse is really going fast, and the car is really intense, you know. The Knight of Swords is intense. There's wind blowing in the background, there's a hawk up in the air, so you know, the trees are bent over because of the wind, you know. So basically it's a really good weather card because it talks about wind and pressure and all the things that can be a metaphor of the wind. It's also a card of highs and lows. This person's making jumps with their motorcycle here or on their horse. You know, it's the up and down of the mind. It's the intensity. It's the chaos that's being controlled, but also, you know, living on the wild side, embracing the chaos a bit, having to be brave. You know, it's a bravery card. It's a knight in shining armor, you know, who's going to defend you, who's going to fight for you, or attack you in some way. It can be someone who's attacking you, whether it's verbally, mentally, or even physically. So, you know, it can be a really positive card or a really negative card, like all the sword cards can. And a lot of people interpret this card as a message, like somebody's delivering you a message, or, you know, the swords being, you know, there's like a famous saying from Indiana Jones, like the pen is mightier than the sword, and it probably was been around before Indiana Jones, but that movie made it popular. Basically, like, the pen is mightier than the sword. So whenever you see a court card and that person's holding a sword, it can talk about that person writing something, or forcing someone to write something, or, you know, having to dictate something, you know. So, you know, when you think of the court cards, it can talk about technology and also writing and words and language and communication. So those can be big themes with any of these court cards. I would say keywords for the Knight of Swords. I always say something's up and down, something's chaotic when I see this card, something's intense. It's going to be one of the fastest moving energies you have to deal with, and you're going to learn something from it, you know. The Queen of Swords. Of course, the Knight of Swords represents like an adult, but like one who's still figuring out their purpose, one who's still fighting their battles. Or the Page of Swords can be a child or someone who's in young adult phase who's still asking questions. This person's like living what they believe, but they may be fighting for someone else's cause. In the King and Queen status, they're fighting, like, they're in their own energy, like they're doing something because they know it's right for themselves and for other people. They're in authority. This is a person who's holding the Ace of Swords in their hands, this Queen of Swords, and so is the King. Regardless of gender, these are beautiful cards. The King of Swords is known to be more of a senior energy in the deck, and they did that with this deck as well. It's all about the power of the mind, not necessarily the power of the body, and they did that with this card as well in the King of Swords. So I think this is a brilliant card for the King of Swords. It has that hawk on him as well, and he's wearing like a bird training glove. Very beautiful. If we'll focus on the Queen for just a little bit, then we'll get back to the King. This Queen of Swords is everything. I mean, she is the queen that has gone through some serious BS. She's dealt with a lot of stuff, and she knows how to deal with it. She knows how to draw boundaries. She knows how to protect herself. She's smart. She's logical. She's everything that the air suit is. Compassionate. She can be gentle. She can be sensitive, but she also can be, you know, vicious like the wind, basically. So you don't mess with the Queen of Swords. She's got a knife, you know, and it's definitely a card of boundaries and clear communication and having something important to say, believing in something important. In this card, she's surrounded by clouds, in the background, not up around her head, but at her base. So that just shows that she's grounded within the thoughts. She's grounded within the, her head's above the illusion, basically, and so is her heart. Because clouds can represent dreams and illusions, and things being obscured. So yeah, the Queen of Swords, I would say keywords are boundaries, empowerment, intelligent, and she's often a placeholder for somebody who's been scorned in a reading, or somebody who is against somebody else, or somebody who is an obstacle in the way. She's a really fierce obstacle to have in your way, and if you are embodying the Queen of Swords, then no one's going to want to get in front of you, or you're going to really have to prove yourself and prove your intelligence and prove what you're willing to do in order to get to where you want to go. Sometimes you have to dig into the Queen of Swords energy and become it. Other times you have to dodge that energy because it's like, oh, you don't want to mess with that Queen of Swords kind of thing. So you got to gauge out what is the right way to interpret that card in a reading. It's kind of fun. You guys, I have to say the Suit of Swords is probably the most, difficult but most rewarding suit to dance with, basically, in a reading, and to tease out the right answers, whether you're getting those answers from the person or from your spirit guides or both. It's a communication tool, anyway. Tarot's just used to communicate with your person and also with your spirit guides and communicate with yourself, basically. So the King of Swords is all about strategy. And the Queen of Swords also represents strategy, but the King of Swords is known to be the chess player, the lawyer, where the Queen of Swords could be mostly the judge, I'm not saying that feminine and masculine are split that way, but they're just traditional interpretations of these cards. It's based on their posture and how they're sitting in the regular tarot, in the Rider-Waite, Smith-Waite decks. The Queen of Swords is facing off into one side of the card in the traditional interpretation of this card, versus in this one she's sitting in a computer chair looking directly at us. So they changed the meaning a bit with this deck. Oftentimes the reason why the Queen of Swords is not facing the reader but it's facing the side of the card is because she's engaging with somebody else. She's having to use her mind, use her power, use her words to assert some type of energy. Versus the King of Swords is usually faced directly on, or in this case it's faced, to the side a little bit to be a bit disarming. This is a very, kind and thoughtful person, but the King of Swords is very intelligent, and if they know that they can hurt somebody with their words, and especially when these cards are reversed, that brings out the negative qualities or the stagnant qualities of that card. So, or just brings out, some type of weakness of that card or inactivity of that energy, because reversals are complex, but basically the King of Swords in its glory is someone very wise, strategic. You want to have them on your team. They could be a lawyer, they could be an enforcement officer, law enforcement, military person. They could be someone who's in a high up position within a company that's in the intellectual or the database side of it, the technology side of it. The King of Swords is, like a battle strategist, basically, which is really cool. So when the King of Swords comes up in a reading, it talks about integrity, talks about the ego, talks about clear mind, and intelligence, and oftentimes it's a benevolent energy when it's upright, and when it's reversed it's like a antagonistic energy. It can be someone who's really cruel, someone who's abusive, someone who's using their mind to overpower somebody else. So it can be quite a vicious card when it's reversed, and that's unfortunate. When the King and Queen cards are reversed, they can be quite malevolent, and that's just reality. So that's what I've got for the court cards and for the minor arcana. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial so far. If you want to stick around for the major arcana, I'll briefly go through the air sign, zodiac sign attributes of the major arcana that I've selected up here. Basically, the suit of swords is the suit of air, and the suit of air is associated with magician, the emperor, the empress, the lovers, the justice, and the star. And some of these are not traditional interpretations, but just something that I've kind of noticed about them with my own experience and watching other readers. You know, the air signs in the zodiac wheel are Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra. Actually, it goes in the order of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, actually. Because Gemini is the first air sign, Libra is the second, and Aquarius is the third. Aquarius is the fixed air sign, and that represents the Emperor and the star card here. Gemini is the mutable air sign that represents the magician and the lovers. Mutable being flexible, interchanging. And the cardinal sign is Libra, which is justice and empress, which is like the go-getters, the starters, the initiators of the zodiac. So that's very interesting. They're all really great communicating, like high levels of communication and intelligence type of energies and zodiac signs. And we have the first one here being the magician, ruled by Mercury, which governs Gemini and Virgo energy. So the magician, I won't go into too much about what the magician means because I've talked about it in depth in the major arcana video. But in the context of it being an air sign, it's Gemini energy, which talks about both hemispheres of the brain, the masculine and the feminine. It talks about like aligning yourself and aligning your thoughts, and about communication and about technology, and basically just the power of the mind, the power of the speed of thought type of thing. And it has everything to do with manifestation because it's the magician card, and how the mind plays a big role in that. The Emperor is ruled by Aries traditionally, but sometimes Aquarius gets lumped in with the Emperor because it's very much a strong fixed energy, just like the mountains in the background of this card. And I'll just show you here. There's the Aries ram. But if you know, there's a lot of symbolism to the Emperor. It's one of my favorite cards. But with Aquarius talks about humanity and about our neighbors, our friends, and about innovative technology and about basically new eras. And the Emperor is the king that leads us into these technologies, these new eras. It's a leader, you know, a government leader, or a spiritual leader, or a business leader, you know. And Aquarius often falls into that role because Aquarius is Zeus, you know, the Greek god, the king of all the heavens type of thing. So that's why this card is associated with Aquarius sometimes. So there's an element of like lightning associated with this, and the energy of Uranus as well, because that's something that's very Aquarius, is the planet Uranus. But yeah, basically the Emperor is about, you know, the leadership qualities and how it pertains to like leading a people, humanity, leading the front wave of a technology boom, or the internet, the wave of the internet, being at the forefront of that, the forefront of market trends. You know, the Emperor is all about that. The Empress is Libra energy, which is cardinal. She's like the starter, the go-getter of the air signs. She's the goddess of love. And, you know, she does talk about abundance, but that's more so the Taurus nature of this card, because the Empress is Libra and Taurus. Her air sign energy is more to do with the love, you know, the seventh house. And, you know, our connection to our love life and all of that, which is beautiful. So she's the goddess of love, and she definitely can indicate that that's a topic in the reading. We've got the Lovers here, Gemini energy. It shows the angel with the two trees and the man and the woman in the bottom of the card, and the Lovers card is complex. I don't pretend to know everything I need to know about the angel cards in general, because there's a lot of biblical mythology associated with the angel cards. What I do know about the Lovers card, and the fact that it's a Gemini energy, is it's talking about choices. It's also talking about the union of the masculine and the feminine, the hemispheres of the brain, and also the energies within us. And it talks about union, basically the Lovers card is a union energy, and it's a choice energy, which is very much Gemini air sign energy. We have the Justice card, which is Libra, the other side of Libra, which is like the scales and the righteousness and the laws, the rules. Justice often comes through in a reading, and it's Libra energy, when something has to be balanced out, when something's unfair. And when I see the Justice card, I know that justice has nothing to do with what we perceive it to be. Justice is something that happens on like the divine level, because the divine, God, goddess, or universe, or whatever, is the only thing that truly understands what justice is. We can't comprehend justice. We think we know what it is, but we really don't. It's a card of karma. Karma and justice are very much interrelated, but they're not the exact same thing. And it's a very complex card. I think Justice card is probably one of the hardest cards to read in the whole deck. It can talk about society and rules and all of that, but in the context of it being Libra energy, it's just about fairness, equality, and to me, I always think the divine has a hand to play in the reading when you see the Justice card. And it can talk about something simple as contracts and legal situations as well. Which is very much a very popular way for that card to come through in a tarot reading. You wouldn't believe how common those types of situations are with people. Whether it's paperwork they're trying to get through to an application in the government, or whether it's an actual all-out legal battle that they're stuck in, or some type of conflict in the family, or a divorce. Those are very popular. Separation and all that. Although I choose to read the Three of Swords as separation, I read the Justice as divorce. Okay? So that just makes it easier for me as a reader. Anyway, the Star card is Aquarius energy. It talks about the healing energy of Aquarius, the flowing water of Aquarius, the gift that innovation and community is for humanity, the gift of networking and of stardom, of being recognized for your beauty. It's a very beautiful card. I'm not going to bring it up close to the camera because it does show a nude person, and I don't want the video to be blocked on my channel, so I'm just going to leave the card there because YouTube has special rules about that. But anyway, it's a beautiful card. It talks about vulnerability and service in some ways. It has other meanings, but the Aquarius version of meanings of this card, I tend to see as just being like a blessing, the flowing of water, the cleansing energy, the cleansing aspect of like higher thinking, when truth washes over us, basically. When we start living our truth, it's very much a self-care card, which is, good mental health is part of your self-care, and it makes it a lot easier to practice self-care when you're working on your mental health. So that's very much a mental health card as well. All right. Well, There, we've blasted through all these swords and air energies. I hope you enjoyed this well, it's basically a reading, but I hope you enjoyed this discourse and all the different meanings of the cards and how I recommend reading them as an experienced tarot reader. And if you want to follow more content like this, subscribe to my channel, hit the thumbs up button, let me know in the comments below what you thought about this video. I'd love to hear from you. You can check out the Wands and the Pentacles videos I've made in previous weeks. You can also check out the Major Arcana video that I made and the How to Read a 10-Card Celtic Cross video. They're all really good lessons, I think. And I'm going to be posting the next video on the Suit of Cups and the Suit of Water, which is the same suit, but in one video. And we'll talk about that as the next lesson. And then moving forward, there's going to be other topics as well, so I hope you stick around. All right, thank you, and I'll see you again soon.